Hey guys, welcome to another Reaper blog tutorial. We're back looking at EZDrummer again because I had a request to show how I would mix using my track template that I shared recently for EZDrummer. So here's how the drums sound without any processing. I don't know about you, but if I went to a studio and I got drums that sounded like this, I'd be pretty happy. This is a great sounding drum recording already without any processing. I'd be really happy with having this to start the mix. But it's not perfect and we can do better. There are a lot of things that we might need to do to make this a more modern sound. But the advantages that we do have, we can change any of these kit pieces. We don't like the sound of them. We don't have to deal with bleed. We have a good sounding room. And the performance can be changed at any time. So let's look at just one of the tracks that we have available, the ambient mono mic. That's this one here in the plugin. And we're going to listen to this one by itself. I mean, that sounds pretty good, but there's a lot of hi-hat in it. And unlike a real room mic in a room, we can just grab this knob in EZDrummer and pull it down. And now there's half as much hi-hat in that room mic. No hi-hat in a room mic now. So I don't want it completely out of there. But if I want that room mic to really just be heavy kick and snare and toms, then we have this huge advantage of being able to customize that in the plugin after recording. It's pretty amazing. We're going to use that. We're going to put that around 40%. I'm going to do the same with the stereo ambient mics. That's this one here. So I'm basically just using these room mics for roomy kick and snares. I don't want any hi-hats in there. And that way I can really dial in the compression the way that I want without the hi-hat triggering compression for the kick and snare. I just want to really enhance the backbeat. These other knobs are for bleed in the overhead mics, which is how much kick, snare, toms, and hi-hat are in the overheads. I always keep that at 100%. Because that's a more natural sound. So let's solo that and hear that. If I turn it all the way down, it's just crash cymbals. And a real drum kit doesn't sound like that. It sounds something more like at 100%. And maybe even with more kick and snare than that. Now, if we listen to the snare bottom mic, we can hear that there's actually kick in that mic. So we can dial that in any amount that we want for kick bleed. I like to have it up pretty high so to make it more of a realistic thing. But for really, really tight or fast drums, you might want to dial that back a little bit so you're not getting the kick triggering the snare bottom. So that sounds more like a real mic in real life. And I think it's really cool to have that option. So that's the first tip I can share for you. Now let's listen to these all and let's build a mix from scratch. I'm going to pull all my faders down And we'll start with the overheads. Bring this up to unity gain and hit play. I want to keep lots of headroom, so I'm just going for about -12 on all these meters. I'll do the snare top next. When it gets back to a part with the snare. I'm going to jump ahead to the part with the toms so we can get a good level for those. All right, and back to here. All right, and these one-shot shaker, tambourine, and percussion ambient, I'm not going to use those at all. In fact, I'm just going to hide them. All right, so now let's move on to processing the individual tracks. Let's say that we're happy with the source drum sounds, or we can't change them anymore. At some point, you need to commit to the sound and you move on. So I guess we'll just start with a kick. We can use some EQ to make that a little more aggressive, a little more assertive. A boost in the high frequency is anywhere from like 2K up to 10K. It's going to give you more attack. I'm really not a fan of the sound of it in this area, but somewhere around 8K works pretty well. And maybe not like a 12 dB boost, but just something that's a little more appropriate. All right, and let's scoop out some of the mids we don't need. In fact, let's boost a little bit, sweep around until we find an area that doesn't sound very good for this particular drum. Hear that? We don't want any of that. So off. And that's the starting point. We'll move on to the next drum. Let's try to go through this quickly. Now, this is a situation where we need to listen to both of the kicks together, because anytime we're doing EQ, especially with affecting the low end, it can actually change the phase relationship. And so that's something we need to check. And keeping them normal polarity is working for us. So I'm going to leave it like that, and let's listen to it with the overheads. Let's actually work on sculpting the sound of the overheads, or the sound of the drums in the overheads. So there's a lot of cymbals in this, and there's a bit of kick and snare in here. And I'm liking that a little bit better, and let's hear that with a kick. We'll hear it without the plugins. A little nicer. Snare is next. There's a bit of ring on that snare that I don't really like. Some people like ring, but I'm not a big fan of it. So up in this range, we're going to get more stick attack, more crack to it. Let's jump to another part of the song. You have to be careful in this area that you don't bring out any sort of whistle tones where, well, it kind of sounds like whistling. So let's say there is okay. I'm not too picky about this. I just want to make sure that we're making an improvement, not making it actually worse. Let's hear that with the snare bottom. Let's bring in that EQ. All right, and all these drums. All right, so let's make this kind of huge sounding. And we'll start with EQ, but we're definitely going to need some compression on this. All right, so the technique here is making a high-pass filter, deep frequency, but we're just kind of making that kick sound powerful there, which is a little counterintuitive. We're cutting out lows to increase the lows, but if it's effective, then, you know, use it. Right around there. We can scoop out a bit above. So I like the sound of that a lot more than on its own. So let's compare that. It's a pretty hyped sound, but I think it works. Let's try it with some compression. No compression. Can you hear that little sort of pop there from the snare? Listen for that. That's the function of the attack. So if we have this slower, it's going to dull that. And if we open it up just a little bit, that was only 1 millisecond. It can let some of that attack cut through and enhance the snare. So I'm sort of using this like a reverb and a distortion at the same time. It sounds more like a lo-fi drum loop, right? And just blending that in with the more clean sounding, maybe more natural sounding other mics makes it work. Now with the stereo ambient mics, we can do something a little bit different. This track here is getting a signal from EZDrummer. We can duplicate this and process this in 2 different ways. We don't really have to do any extra routing. So I'm just going to duplicate the track, right click, duplicate tracks. Now both of these tracks have the same signal on them. Let's try to keep one clean, like this one. Keep that original, and then we'll do one more special effect sort of track. So again, I'm going to start with some EQ. and ReaComp. All right, so we'll blend that in with the other track. All right, at this point, I think it's sounding pretty good. It's got a little more aggressiveness to it, a little more modern shape to it. There's still a lot more things we can do. Like we haven't compressed the kick or the snare or anything like that. But I think we're probably about 20 minutes into this. So let's take a break, split this up, and continue this in another video. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon. Visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.